G'day, everybody. Two ordinary cops back again. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, good mate. Yes, we've actually got a few shout outs today, and mate, and I think we've got a pretty good topic, something to lighten up after our last week. What do you reckon?
Well, it's sort of light. I mean,
Well,
so we're going to talk about a bit of first aid and like the medical response from police and things like that. And I've got a fairly shady history with that, my friend.
well, you do. Yes,
So
yeah,
I mean, we can talk about it in a humorous way, but yeah, and I mean, it's a bit more just interesting than last week. It's an important topic, talking about the suicide and how it affects not just responding to the actual matters themselves when members of the public are in that situation, but and then how we spoke about it affects police as well. So we covered that. It's fairly heavy, um, but yeah, talking about the first aid side of things, it's a bit of a different side of the job. But you got some shout outs, mate.
yes, mate, I do. So we'll start with the first one. So Chloe and Josh Clark from New South Wales, they're both joining the police. Yeah, and basically, I think Josh got onto us first, and Chloe's catching up. But yeah, no, they love it, mate. They love just getting a bit of the insight into I suppose what's coming up for them and all that sort of thing. And I was just wondering if we could chat a bit more about work-life balance. Something because I suppose both of them be in the police and they've got a couple of kids, so it might help out if any ideas we've got, or even any ideas that any other police have that seems to work well. I mean, I
Mm.
can't really talk. I haven't got kids, and I broke up. My marriage broke up during the police, so I'm probably not the best one for the work-life balance.
You're a bad example, mate. A bad example. You're not. You're what not to do. That's all right.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but the we did sort of talk about it in the episode where we spoke about women in policing, and it was also speaking about work-life balance as well. So we've sort of covered it a little bit. But yeah, if they need a bit more info, I'm sure we can talk about it at some point. And we
Yeah,
always sort of mention it, like it comes up a bit. So
yeah, definitely.
yeah,
So yeah, mate. Yeah, that's probably something. If or anybody else that something that seems to work, let us know. Mate, the other one, mate, we've got to give a call out to Mikey. He's from India. He's our biggest fan in India. So, and I do apologise, Mikey. We're supposed to shout out to you a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately, yeah. I mean, we've both got a lot going on, but it doesn't mean you're any less than anybody else. And yeah, thank you very much for listening, mate. And thank you for the video you sent through, showing some good Indian pale ale. It seems to have a good head on it, mate. So that might be something we might have to try out in the future.
I reckon so. That's a good idea.
Yeah, oh,
Oh,
definitely.
very good.
We can't knock that back. But yeah, thank you, Mikey, for getting in touch, mate. Then we have anonymous for the podcast. So she got in contact with us. She's Queensland. She's thinking about going to the police. Yeah, basically, I think she's got some relatives, a number of relatives in the police. So that's why we not really mentioning her name as such. So and look, in touching that, mate, I was actually going to mention any sources you have. They remain confidential. So when you're going for search warrants and so on and so forth, you don't have to mention your source. Well, you legally, you can't mention your sources. So, yeah, just a bit of a trick for anybody that's going into the police. But we might go a bit more into the depth into
Jeez,
that
that's a
later on.
tangent, mate. Well done.
Well, yeah, mate, yeah, it just came to mind. You know how my
Yeah.
mind. Well, probably not many people do. Um, but yeah, yeah, no, she really loves it. But I think she wanted to touch on a couple of things, and one was if we could do a bit more women in policing, and I did let her know that we do want to get a few women on. Especially there's a couple I can think of in the job, and there's one that's left. We spoke about Katie. So
Mm.
we might have to hit her up as well, and I think Kylie and Carly are probably two. I'd like to reach out to as well and see if they'd like to come on. What do you reckon there, mate?
Yeah, no, that'll be right. We'll probably make a few arrangements in the next few weeks
Yeah.
for sure.
So yeah, no, it was so yeah. Thank you very much for sending that through, mate. But I believe that's about it for today. But mate, do you want to open up what we're going to talk about today? I've got a couple of stories in relation to first aid, but we might let you
Yeah.
start.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. So obviously, first aid is we're all first responders, and the absolute primary role. There's a legislated purpose of the police force, and I can't remember them all by word, but the very first one is protect life and property, and obviously the very first part of that, by a long shot, is protect life. As a result, first aid is something that you're trained in and you maintain throughout your career. Just your standard first aid certificate. Now, when we were in there, like we've mentioned this before, we had a couple of ex paramedics who became cops, and they weren't happy that we were just doing stock standard first aid certificates, given that we were being sent to more high end critical incidents on a much more regular basis. So we needed a little bit more than the standard first aider. We sort of had to have a bit more capability. So as a result, they developed the emergency care management plan or program. I can't remember what the P was, and it was very much first responder specific. And it was graphic. It showed body worn video um, of incidents taking place and the first aid. It showed gunshot reactions, both military and police from the US, video footage, and how they've how you this is how you literally apply a tourniquet and things like that. So we were lucky in a sense that it went above and beyond the standard first aid. Now I think they've reverted back to just the old provide first aid, which I now teach. Um, but yeah, it was something that you would use all the time. And I think
Yeah.
the running joke between you and I was, oh yeah, we did bloody first aid all the time. But then I actually think about it. The overwhelming majority of my first aid was me going, just sit still, stop bloody moving, hold that applique, hold that on tighter, put more pressure on that wound. The ambulance is on its way, and that was it. Because I mean, the fact was that they were conscious and breathing, and they had an injury or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've got a few memorable ones, but yeah, I think the oversight of, I mean, like a bit of a situation of what we're talking about today is um, the fact is that police will go to incidents all the time where first aid's required, and we work hand in hand with the ambulance. So we're often at the same jobs multiple times a shift.
Yeah.
Um, so, mate, do you want to kick off a story or two?
Yeah, mate. I'll start off probably the first one, mate, is one in when I was out at Maningrida. Now everybody, well, anybody that's been out to Maningrida or lived out at Maningrida or even worked as a cop out at Maningrida is well aware there's a wet barge every 2 weeks. And I think the alcohol probably with the majority of the community probably lasts about a night. And so then they've got to wait 2 weeks till the next one. But so we used to have, well, basically extra police on. I think they could pick up their stuff from the barge about midday or something like that. So we had shifts starting at midday, and I'll give a shout out to Phil Trenery, I believe I was working with. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, and if you're listening to it, but yeah, he and I were working together, and we were just doing general patrols. Now, just driving around, I mean, everything's relatively low key, especially, after 12 o'clock because they haven't quite filled themselves with beer. But so we're just driving around the town, and there's a place in Maningrida called New Sub, and that's basically where they built a whole lot of new houses for the Indigenous people out there. And we're just chatting away and driving around. And anyway, something caught my eye just out of the corner of my eye, and as I'm chatting away with Phil. Anyway, and I said to Phil, I said, mate, can you just do a U? He was driving. I said, can you just do a U-turn? I just need to go back and have a look at that. Anyway, so you do a U-turn. We come back. There's a guy sitting in the gutter, and he's like, there's actually blood running down the gutter. And was oh shit, all right, mate, you're all right. There's nobody else with him. Everybody else is inside the house drinking. Anyway, what's happened is he's had an argument and got the shits and put his arm through a car window, and so he sliced either one of the major veins or arteries in the arm. And there was a lot of blood. Like the blood was actually running down the gutter. And that's kind of I just caught it out of the corner of my eye. Anyway, so we've basically got out and we've gone inside and said, you got a towel or something, we need to wrap this up and all that sort of stuff. And it didn't seem overly bad at the time, but anyway, we wrapped it up and we said, mate, keep pressure on that. We put him in the back of the cage because it's just so much quicker to get down the clinic, and we called the clinic on call. And basically shot down the clinic. Now, by the time we got down to the clinic, for anybody that knows the back of the police cars or the cages, there's wells, or what do you call them, like, rivets. And those wells were filling up with blood. So that's how much blood he'd actually lost in that short trip. It's probably about a 2-minute trip down to the clinic. Anyway, we got him out, and the nurse got there at the same time, and we got him in, and I had to basically, while they were preparing everything, I had to put my fingers in his, basically it was in his the crook of his arm, and hold the vein or the artery shut, so he wouldn't bleed to death. And I stayed there for, it was over half an hour. It was probably closer to 45 minutes, that until they got everything ready, so they could actually stop the bleeding. So if we had not rocked up, and if I hadn't seen that out of the corner of my eye, he would have definitely been dead. There was another couple of minutes, and they reckon he would have been gone. So
Yeah, you
that's
can't
just
lose too much of that fluid, can you?
no. And it's amazing how much is in the body, because it looks like so much as well.
Well,
But
that was yeah. There's a few stories about that. It yeah. If you get a cup, 100 ml of water in a cup, and pour it on the ground and watch it spread out, it does spread a long way.
yeah,
And I remember getting some pretty wild estimates of the amount of blood on the ground from crime scenes. Oh, there must be litres here. And the ambos turn up and go, nah, it's about half a litre. He'll be fine. So, the only, I mean, I've been to a few exceptions where there were literally litres on the ground, and it's just one big sloppy scab.
yeah.
But yeah, sorry, mate, you keep going.
No, mate, yeah. So, it was just one of those things. And basically, I think they had to end up flying him into Darwin. But the lack of even care from his own family, they were inside the house, had no idea. Even when we basically were revving him up, and, to get something to wrap around his arm, had very little care in the world. Like, it took them ages. We had to really spark him into something to get us like some material, so we could actually wrap his arm up and put pressure on it, and all that sort of thing. And yeah, if it just, it goes to show. I mean, we definitely saved a life that day, and it was just from doing patrols. And as you always say, mate, we had the window down, and just chatting, but still listening and still observing what's going on around. So I think that's probably the importance about staying vigilant, so to speak.
Yeah, having that situational awareness, that's good. No,
Yeah.
it's important.
So
Yeah.
yeah, mate. Have you got another one, or mate? I've
Oh
got.
yeah, I've got. They're flooding to me as we think about it, which I knew they would. Um, yeah, so I think, I mean, I've been involved in heaps and heaps and heaps of them. So a lot where we've turned up, and as I've said before, I've done CPR. I think the number's 23 and 0. So I've done a lot of that. I've done a lot of critical intervention, early intervention. It just so happened that these guys there was nothing we could do for them. There was nothing anyone could do for them, because the ambos were on scene very quickly as well.
Yeah.
But when it comes to first aid and really assisting ambos, I've got two where we were completely necessary for the ambos because they were just a bit short-handed. One, and it was early on in Catherine that I remember, was a fella was working on the roof of a building. I've mentioned this in a podcast previously, I believe. Bloke was, I think he was an electrician. He was installing something or fixing a wiring connection on the roof, and he actually slipped and fell off the roof. But he sort of fell in such a way that he wanted to jump away from the roof. And what happened was his arms come down on a Colorbond fence that didn't have the capping across the top, so it was just straight sheet
Oh,
iron to the top.
yeah.
And anyway, it severed his tricep right to the bone. He was actually probably lucky not to lose his arm just on impact. It was a fairly decent fall, so he would have been fine. He might have had a few sore knees or something had he just hit the lawn, but he didn't. His arm hit the fence, and he very quickly clamped his arm open as far as he could to stop that tricep from coming apart. And he was holding it. He managed to call 000 for himself. And for the grace of God, where he was actually working was 2 doors down from the ambulance station.
Oh,
Now,
right.
that doesn't mean much in Catherine because the ambulances are never there. So who was there was the supervisor. So the supervisor of the ambos on duty was there. He's jumped in his little intensive paramedic vehicle and driven 2 doors down or whatever it was. And he's called for immediate, urgent police backup because he knew that his blood wagons were nowhere near him.
Yeah.
So he had no support. He had no backup from ambos, but he needed police. He needed just assistance. Anyway, we turned up. Me and my partner turned up to the job. I can't remember who was working with us. Irrelevant. And anyway, this paramedic who was a well-known bloke, you know him. He had a tourniquet on this fella's arm, and this guy's starting to lose consciousness by now. He bled lots. There was a lot of blood lying around. I think what saved him a little bit was there's no major critical arteries. There are arteries there, but they're not like really critical arteries on that backside of your arm like that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of blood, but it was just oozing out of his arm and running like lots, but not spurting like an arterial bleed.
Yeah.
So we turn up, and very quickly he's got this tourniquet in his mouth, and he's trying to lie the bloke down and get a lining because he wanted to get some fluid into him before he moved him. So we assisted. We've laid him down and we've applied the tourniquet. And then it was a matter of assisting the ambo to actually get a line into his arm. So we got to hold him still because the bloke was going into a little bit of shock just for the amount of blood he'd lost. So we were helping holding his legs up just to assist with that shock treatment, as in the actual definition of shock, which is a rapid drop of blood pressure basically is what causes that shock, or a lack of fluid in your blood. So the loss of blood is what will send you into shock. And so we were treating him for that. He had no way of transporting this patient because there was no ambulances available, like I said. So what we did was we had more room in the cage than he had in the back seat of his vehicle. So we got his grab bags, threw them in the back of the police vehicle, loaded him and this person into the back. And one of us, I can't remember, I think it was me, I got in the cage as well, and we shut the cage door and drove to the hospital. So we're under lights and sirens, but obviously we don't want to throw us around too much in the back. And we took him up to hospital. Now I think they stabilised him there, and he was evacuated to Darwin. But just purely on first aid, like this is just a tradie doing his job, falling off the roof and just had an accident. But it was that critical. And just I think the beauty of it was we sort of knew our first aid, so the paramedic could work on the critical medical treatment of the patient to stabilise him for movement, for transport. And we were able to just provide that first aid and assist with what we knew without a lot of conversation. So, and that he was fine. He came back. He had surgery, and his arm was. I think there would have been a lot of rehab because he had a fairly significant, like basically severed his tricep.
Yeah.
And he was back at work about 6 weeks later, I think. But he says he was forever grateful. We saw him a few more times around town, and he was. He would always tear up a bit when he saw us, and you blokes, you saved me. Especially over a few beers at the golf club, which is what everyone used to do. So, that was very early on. So I think it sticks in my mind because I was fairly junior. But I've got a few more. I'll ramp up, mate. But you want to go? We'll go back and forth if you like.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. I've got another one. Now everybody knows there's a a caravan park. Not a very high what would you call it, social sort of caravan park on the north side.
It doesn't have very good Google reviews, does it, mate?
No. Actually, I'd be surprised if anybody there knew what Google was. But mate, yeah. So we got called out there, and it was called to a stabbing, basically. And this is it's I mean it's serious, but it's got a bit of a funny kind of story along with it. So we got there, and we're confronted with basically a naked man with a sheet wrapped around him, or a towel. I can't really remember. I can't remember who I was working with. I've got a picture of him in my mind, but I can't actually remember who my partner was that day. And this is fairly early on in my career. And anyway, the ambos were there, and they were just trying to settle him down, because he'd been stabbed in the back. So the story goes, he was cheating on his missus, having sex with another female. He was white. The girl his girlfriend was Indigenous, and the girl he was cheating on, or doing the cheating with, was Indigenous. And basically, his girlfriend caught him in the act. Obviously, he
That
was
old chestnut.
Oh yeah, so she's walked in on him, but and look, I'm sure there's quite a few stories about this happening in every sort of culture, but she's just picked up a knife and stabbed him fair in the back, as he's like doing the deed. So,
Oh no, I shouldn't laugh. That's terrible that I laugh. Yeah.
So anyway, he's obviously he's got up. Luckily, well, it didn't seem too severe. Like there was a bit of bleeding and like well, it was a bit of blood and all that sort of thing. And he was a bit rolled up. Well, in a couple of ways, I suppose. Um, and anyway, he so by the time we got there, they were outside. His missus had run away, and like the girlfriend. Um, was there, and the ambulance were just trying to treat him and all that sort of thing. And basically, so we got there, we assessed him, we just said, "Look, mate, let the ambos look after you." We got our information, and we are just starting to talk to the other chick and to try and find out where this person had gone, or to find out, where the nice. You're just doing your first general inquiries when you get there. And anyway, then we hear this bloody fight going on, or this noise behind us. We turn around. Well, what's happened was the girl he was cheating on his girlfriend with also had a boyfriend who was Indigenous, and so we turn around and we're confronted with now a naked man trying to find an Indigenous man because obviously he was having sex with his girlfriend. So anyway, we
Is this about first date or is this bloody Days of Our Lives, mate?
mate, he gets there. So
Yeah.
anyway, we've turned back around and we've managed to settle them down, basically, and just separate and said, mate, we need to get this guy like first aid because the poor ambulance, they were trying to treat him, and they were confronted with all this stuff. So it's not so much us counting first aid, but we're just allowing the ambos to do their job.
Mm.
Anyway, the Embos, yeah, we calmed the situation down. We didn't have to use any force. Anyway, he got transported to hospital, and we followed up there. Basically just to keep see what was happening and all that sort of thing. And then they called us in and they said, "Oh, look, can you settle him down? He's still pretty upset and angry and all that sort of thing." Which, I suppose he hasn't really got much to be angry about. However, they said we need him calm because when they did an X-ray, they realised that the knife had pierced the outer rim of the heart, and they said any strenuous like action, like on the heart, if it starts to beat harder, it could burst and die. Um, then we've just thought back of that fight, and if we had to use force, because it almost got to the stage where we had to use force, it could have been a death in custody. So yeah, mate, it's just one of those things. Like our job there was basically to allow the Embos to do their job, which they did a fantastic thing. But you've got to also counteract all the other shit that was happening. So,
Yeah.
you got anything to add into that one?
Yeah, I think the big thing is there that you've got to have that knowledge of what can go wrong. So you've always got to treat it at its highest end. I know it's really easy in society to just sort of go, they'll be right, they'll be right, they'll be right. And look, the trouble is most of the time they are. But like you say, if it would have gone through into the cardiac sac, the sac around your heart, basically.
Yeah,
And if it had gone into any level of heart and muscle, which is possible, then you're right. You've made potentially a hole directly into, well, nearly a hole into your heart. And if your blood pressure goes up too high, it's just going to burst out. So, and then you don't live for too long when your heart's belting blood out the side of it. So,
no,
um, no, that'll be the end of that. So, yeah, it's one of those things. And mate, I've had a few of them as well where we've had people full of alcohol, full of adrenaline, with extremely serious stab wounds. I've been to 3 jobs where the knife was still hanging out of them as well. So
yep,
the knife is out the back or the knife's out the front, and we're just stabilising. We're fairly lucky that they all occurred in regional centres, so that we had ambulance and we had paramedics close by. So what our job there was to, mate, you need to sit still, seriously, and you go, you need to listen to me now. You need to sit still. But I mean, oh god, it's funny they're flooding in now. It's funny how
yep.
last I couldn't. You just did it every shift, mate. Every single shift in general duties, you're doing first aid every
That's
shift in the
true.
Northern Territory. I
Yeah,
can't remember one where you didn't do something like just hold it, or you might just tell a bloke to go to the hospital for some reason, or it goes from that lower end right up to, oh, geez, we put a band-aid on a kid's finger once because they came up and tried to tell us he cut his finger. So we just did the little community engagement thing and put a band-aid on. He was stoked.
yeah.
Little bloke in Darwin City. Mum and Dad was stoked as well. So, I mean, we had that. We've had first aid responses to to serious intoxication, drug overdoses, and things like that in the city. The Northern Territory doesn't have anywhere near the level of drug overdose issues as other major centres and other jurisdictions have. Like, your Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane, all those big cities. You get your junkies in town, and they overdose all the time, and you'll be first on scene, and you're going to get ambos in there all the time. But I think from what another story, I've got two that are bloody full on first aid assist ambo sort of jobs. I've got two that I want to tell, but one I'll tell one that it was just extreme. So once again on a night shift, like a week night shift, there's nothing happening. It was one of those nights that's eerily quiet, and you just go, you're waiting for a bomb to drop because it's like, it's too bloody quiet. It's too quiet. Like something's going to go down. And
Yeah.
Anyway, I got sent out. All my crews were back at the station, and they were just doing paperwork. So it was about, I don't know, two or three in the morning, something like that. So anyway, I get onto comms and just say, is there any old jobs you want cleared up? I can roll past just so we can clear the screen. And they've gone, yeah, get you to attend a noise complaint. It's about 45 minutes old. We haven't had any calls back for it, and there's only one complainant, which is a standard sort of thing. So
Yeah.
very, very basic job. So I roll out to that, and it was just outside Darwin City. So for those who know Darwin, it was in the Parap area. So anyway, I'm rolling out to that. My vehicle was 223, and I get this immediate 223 VKM urgent stand down. We have suicide just taken place at there was a building address in town, closer in, so still in Parap, but closer to the city. So I knew where it was, just did a U-turn, lights and sirens, and went there, and one of my crews went mobile as well. Anyway, I get to this building complex, and it's just quiet. There's no one around, but I can hear a male voice sort of screaming.
Yeah.
Anyway, and he's run out to me because he saw the red and blues, and my crew arrived at about the same time, which was bloody handy. And we get round the back, and what had happened was a very attractive young lady had a domestic with, or not a domestic, it wasn't a violent fight. What had happened is they'd had a night out, they'd had a big argument, and the boyfriend had said, "This isn't working. We're going to break up."
Yeah.
And they were on the fifth store. They were on the fifth floor with a balcony over the back, and she has had a screaming match. He's called it off, and she's just run and jumped off the balcony and fallen 5 stories to the ground. Now, what happened was she's jumped over the balcony, and Darwin being a tropical city, she's landed directly on top of a palm tree, bounced off that, bounced into shrubbery that was a little bit higher, so that the palm tree was right up, not far below the 5th story. So she's hit that. That's arrested her descent. She's rolled off the top of the palm tree, smashed into these bushes, rolled off the top of them, fallen down onto a 6-foot colorbond fence. This one had the capping on.
Yeah.
Her arm went over that, and very similar to the last one. It didn't cut her, but it broke her arm so severely that she was just deformed. She's then landed in a soft garden bed, but to add insult to injury, she landed on a coconut. So they were coconut trees, sorry, and actually fractured her pelvis. So she's now in a puddle in the bottom. She's alive. She's conscious, breathing, but completely broken. She's got multiple fractures, and we didn't know. Like, we've turned up and just gone, don't move, do not move. You need to lie still, and we're just trying to calm her. To her credit, I think, excuse me, I think she was obviously full of adrenaline, and her body had just gone into a shock state from just the sheer impact of what she'd just done. But her boyfriend was hysterical, or ex-boyfriend, I suppose. So anyway, we've moved him away because we needed to do this. We've called urgent. I mean, ambos have been sent anyway, but the call then changed. I think we then obviously gave a sit rep through to our comms that sent an ambulance post-haste. And what we had to do was get her still, because obviously we're thinking she's got serious spinal injuries. So we're really worried about the spinal injuries. And it was just like, oh, what are we going to do? Like, we need an ambulance now. Anyway, he turned up, and he's just got so many things to deal with. He had to triage the injuries within one patient. So the critical one was potentially spinal. We're thinking she's got you could tell she had she had what's called an open book fracture of her pelvis, which means when you've had an impact on the back, it can actually break your pelvis in such a way that the front will fold in on itself, or fold out on itself. And she had these bulging out the front of her broken pelvis was bulging at the front of her hips. So we had that. The ambo, and we were aware that she's going to be bleeding fairly significantly internally because of that. And I'll never forget the intensive care paramedic who was first on scene. He was brilliant. He's turned up. He was an Afghan veteran, so he'd been a combat medic in Afghanistan. Anyway,
Yeah.
he turns up and goes, "Ah, shit, I can't get." He's trying to get a line in. He says, "I need her unconscious now." So he's going to put her into an induced coma on the ground pretty well. So anyway, he's laid out, and I said, "What do you need? Just we're here for you. What do you need?" And he's gone, "I just need to get a line in, but I've had an adrenaline dump and my hands are shaking." He said,
Yeah.
"I'll tell you what to do," and I'll never forget it. He was just so aware of himself, going, "I've just had an adrenaline dump. It's no problem. I know what I'm doing, but my hands are shaking. I need you to hold my hands still."
Yeah.
So I lay my arm down on her arm against the like, opposite way that she was. I then held him by the wrist, and he said, "Just hold me steady and let me move, and I'll guide this cannula into her arm." So we got a line in there, and straight away he's hitting her with lots, and I mean she's got the whistle in, but we're hitting her with lots and lots of pain meds and just trying to get her. He said, "I need her unconscious," so he's putting her into basically a state where she wasn't going to respond to the pain stimulus that was just all over her body. And potentially, if she's got, we were sure she'd have spinal fractures just given the impact, and we just needed her to be nice and still. So we're into this, and we probably did first aid on the ground, just helping the paramedic do different jobs for about 20 minutes, and he's calling urgently for an actual blood wagon to turn up. A blood wagon's just a very nasty word for an ambulance for those playing along. I figured you'd work it out.
Yeah.
But anyway, we get the ambulance did turn up, and we get her. She's unconscious by this stage, and we transport. She wasn't significantly bleeding anywhere obvious, but he was just worried. Her blood pressure was just going down and down. So obviously, from that pelvic fracture, she's losing blood, bleeding badly internally, and he had no idea what other injuries she's got. So this is a life changing. These are life changing injuries. She's got. God knows what's going on with the spine. Um, God knows what's going on with her internal organs. We don't know if she's got any brain injuries. We did say she was fairly lucid, like she was complaining about pain and a few other things. So we thought her brain was working okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, she just had. I've never seen so many injuries on a living person. I've seen plenty of catastrophic injuries on dead people, but
Yeah.
um, we put her in. We got her. We loaded her up, helped the ambos load up, and then drove off. And we've just gone. We've all looked at each other in a little mini debrief, and just gone, "Are you kidding? Like, what the hell? How did she live a 5-story drop from a building?" And then
Yeah.
with like the it wasn't humor, but it was almost like how what a bloody insult to injury to land on a coconut in the garden bed and have
Yeah.
that break your bloody pelvic. Like it was just. And I think the reason we knew that is she was lying on top of this bloody coconut. It was putting her body on a bad angle. But yeah. Anyway, I don't know her outcome, but she was in a terrible state. Um, and yeah, that was a pretty major one. I've got another quick one from Darwin City, unless you've got one lined up.
Oh, mate, no, no, you go ahead. I
Yeah,
have got. Well, no, actually, I've got just a quick one.
yeah, yeah,
I had a guy. Yeah, basically, this is when I was in Borroloola, and he basically he had an argument with his missus, and obviously, actually, I think he beat her up. And then, for anybody that knows, Indigenous people do sorry business, but they can actually do it on themselves or cause personal self harm when they do bad stuff as a payment for their, I suppose, their sin in a way. And he's picked up a knife and a big, and I mean a big kitchen knife, and stabbed himself in the arm, in the forearm. Um, and basically, I can't remember whether we attended the incident or not, but I've actually still got a photo. And so this knife is bedded in his arm, and it's just about all the way through the arm.
I think
And
I've seen that photo.
yeah, you probably would have,
Yeah,
mate, I think.
mm,
And anyway, so you got to do what is it, donut bandage, isn't it? So you put it around
yeah,
there and wrap it around. But he had to fly out to Darwin, and I remember him sitting in the. We got him to the clinic, or we'd sitting in the clinic, and we had to really wrap it around. And but it's just another thing that we were there. I mean, the medics were doing their job, but our job then was to make sure that he stayed still, because if he moved, and he did move at one stage, and I remember the blood starting to come out of the wound, and they said no, we need to keep him like dead still, because yeah, I mean any sort of movement can cause, well, it just starts bleeding again. So I mean we sat there for probably a couple of hours until the until the air north, I think, not air north, what's it called, the care flight came out
yeah.
and picked him up. But yeah, I mean that's, yeah, and he was sitting there the whole time. You don't pull the knife out; it just stays in there, and you wrap it around and you kind of keep it as still as you can. And yeah, so he flew all the way to Darwin with his knife, basically almost through his forearm, like you could see the point like pushing against the skin on the other side. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah. But anyway, mate, you keep going. That was
that's
just
a,
a short one from me.
that's a lot of motivation, isn't it?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
A lot of sorry, a lot of pain, mate. A lot of what do you call it? Sorry business. Or
Oh yeah. Oh, there's
yeah,
been some horrendous injuries over the years with sorry business. So basically, it needs to be a demonstration of the people and the family and friends of someone who's passed away that
yeah,
you're sorry, and quite often the way they show that they're sorry is by hurting themselves.
yeah,
So like a way of taking on the pain. So
yeah. I think
yeah, oh
you
yeah, terrible injuries through the years,
didn't.
but
Didn't you have a death in relation to rugby?
yeah, I did. That's a very long story, but it's
Yeah,
yeah. That wasn't first aid for us. We turned up and went, yep, there's nothing we can do about that. So
yeah.
it was a femoral artery bleed that was. I mean, you don't last long with them. So, but
No.
no, there was another job I had in Darwin City, and it was the morning. So it was another day, one of those weekday morning things where they're normally the time where you catch up on a bit of work, and there'll be things flowing in, little bits and pieces, but you've generally got time to do follow ups and get a bit of admin out of the way. And I got this call. It was urgent assists paramedic road crash pedestrian. It was a push bike that had gone underneath a bus, and they're saying, "Oh," and then we're attending, and then on the way, the radio said, "We're getting reports that he's actually got a severed foot." So we're thinking, righto, so we're going to have to block the screen off and keep people back because it's fairly graphic.
Yeah,
And I turned up there, and I think I did confirm, and I said, "It's all but severed, so all but amputated foot." Like there was just hanging on by. I could just see a little bit of white. So I think there was tendons connected to skin, and there was two very badly broken bones that were completely exposed, and the foot was cut off. So it's looked like the bus has turned the corner, not seen him, and he's sort of gone under the back wheel a bit, and his bike slammed into the ground. And anyway, had no other injuries, but he was an American fella who was there, and he was the toughest man I'd ever seen in my life. Like super fit guy. He's just lying on the ground, and he's going, "I just don't want to move. I just don't want to move." And we said, "Well, don't move. Don't move anywhere." There was no critical bleeding, which I found weird. I thought that the arteries down to his foot must have been severed, but there was very minimal blood. I mean, there was a bit, but not much. And I thought, well, we've got to do something. And I remember my junior guys were over there, and there was other people there trying to help him. And I just said, "Don't touch him. Don't touch him." I've called urgent ambulance now, and we just isolated him. So I think the first story I told just before about the girl was there was a lot of intervention. We had to help the paramedic intervene quite a bit. With this, there was no intervention. There was nothing from us to do until the ambulance arrived. You just needed to keep him comfortable. And the most important thing for him was to prevent further danger. So he's in the middle of the street. So we immediately blocked the street. I stayed right with the patient and kept everyone back. And he just said, "Just let me sit here." I said, "Mate, we're here for you, mate. The road is blocked. No one's going anywhere." At this stage, we're not investigating anything at this point. We're purely protecting a patient. Um, and he just lay on the ground, and the ambulance turned up, and he straight away had a whistle. So the whistle's just the green whistle that they go in, just provides that immediate pain relief. He then got, I believe it was the early days of fentanyl, and he got a fentanyl injection, and he just was happy then. He was fine. And he's lying there with his foot in a terrible angle, just hanging off the bottom of his leg. And anyway, the Ambos then were able to manipulate his foot a little bit in such a way that they could stabilize him enough for transport.
yeah.
And there was nothing more to do on the ground. He needs to go into emergency surgery to save his foot. And the biggest problem with a lot of these jobs is you never hear the outcome. And I don't think Ambos do much either.
No.
So I don't know what happened to him. We made sure we assisted the Ambos getting him into the ambulance and things like that. But yeah, it was very graphic. I remember looking at his foot, and I'm a morbidly curious weirdo. And I was there, and I'm just saying, "You're all good, mate. I'm just going to have a look. I just want to make sure there's nothing that I can assist with straight away." And he was actually having a look himself, and how he was maintaining his composure was pretty incredible. But I had a really close look, just as the ambulance was turning up, and it was just a very big, blunt chop of his foot.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was probably an example of when the best thing to do was not touch it and just let it stabilize and go from there. So the biggest thing he needed was pain relief and immediate transport to surgery. So there was nothing we could do. And yeah, that was it was a hell of a way to start a whatever day. I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday or something. About 8 o'clock in the morning. So it'd only been at work for about an hour, and it was on. So.
Yeah. Yeah, mate. Sometimes you get those days, don't you? It's actually something you mentioned there, and it kind of struck something with me. And you don't hear a lot of the outcomes. and it's mainly because, I mean, I don't know, I think you'd agree with this. You just go to so many of them, and
Yeah.
there's no way in this world you could possibly try and keep up with all the people that went to hospital that you dealt with. Um,
I tell you
there's
when I did find out about them, when they didn't live.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that became my problem. So, and that happened a lot. So,
Yeah,
you know,
well, yeah, that's
we've done
exactly right.
first aid on people who, oh my God, they're flooding into me. I'm remembering heaps of them.
Mate,
But
I've got some as well, and we're always conscious on keeping these I suppose between 30 and 40 minutes. We're just over 40 now, but
yeah,
yeah, mate, I'm the same. Like, yeah, right, maybe we might need to do a few episodes on these.
oh, they just kept. Well, I couldn't think of any the other day, and now I can just. They're flooding back to me. Like there's hundreds of them. You're doing first aid all the time. You're always doing something. You're always helping paramedics. You're always all the time.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I mean, I can remember, and I think I mentioned this one to you the other day. I rocked up at a BP, and the guy still had the knife sticking out of his chest. It was upper on his, higher on his chest. He was conscious. He was completely fine. He's sitting there, and he's got pressure on it. We've called the ambos, and he kind of he said to me, "Oh, are you going to help?" I said, "Well, mate, no. You keep the pressure on. You've got it all handled. There's
yeah,
there's nothing I can do." And look, some of that also you don't if they've got it, if they're actually doing everything that needs to be done for first aid, it's good to give them something to do because it takes their mind off, and anything else that probably led to that as well. So it gives them a job and gives them something to do, and you can then, I suppose, watch out for any threats around and all that sort of stuff as well. So,
yeah.
yeah, don't, especially a police officer, make sure you've got to use your peripheral, vision
Just
as well.
situational awareness. You need to be aware
Exactly.
of what's going on. You can
Ex-
never get that tunnel vision and focus
Yep.
completely on a problem. You need to keep your wits about you.
Yep.
Because I mean, the fact that you're there, it may be an accident or it may be violent, and there may be an offender nearby. So, I mean, the old doctor's ABCD is the first one's danger. So you need to constantly be scanning for any danger.
That's right. Yep.
There's absolutely no point in you becoming a casualty yourself.
No.
So,
No.
that we teach that in firefighting that the number one priority is protection of life. You,
Yep.
as in you're the most important person there. Secondly, is the protection of other life, and
Yep.
and that's important because people are going to come and save you then. And what's the point of just stacking up casualties?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important that you've got to sterilize the scene, make sure it's as um, as safe as possible. And ambos simply won't go in. It won't matter, and nor should they. It won't matter how critical a patient is. If the situation's not safe for the ambos to enter, they
No.
won't. And
That's
police
right.
will go in and ignore casualties and fix the danger first.
Yep.
If you've got armed people, anything, that's your number one priority is get rid of that person. This is common sense, but it does need to be taught because people will get fixated. And I remember when we did active armed offender training, um, we were trained specifically to ignore casualties. You run past the casualties because your job is to stop the killing and stop the dying, and immediately uh, immediately stop the threat. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, immediate action, rapid deployment. IARD. I remember that one.
Yep.
It's the opposite to the old isolate, contain, and all the rest of it. So there was what was the other one? I sensor. Evacuate,
Yeah. I
negotiate,
see.
conclude, investigate, rehabilitate. Didn't it amazing how you don't forget stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mate, it
I
runs
sensor
into
is
us.
normally the way we dealt with critical incidents with TRG and as a negotiator.
Yep.
But yeah, with an active armed offender who's actively creating casualties by whatever means, it's immediate action, rapid deployment. You don't cordon and contain. You burst in there and stop the threat. So
Yeah.
um, that's always the goal.
I think,
But
yeah,
yeah,
the
and then
important, you hit the nail on the head there. The important thing is remember you are a police officer and you are there to make sure that everything is safe. Um,
yeah,
that's your primary role, and you've got to make sure that you stick to that. Yeah, I mean, you just said it perfectly. But the problem is, mate, you just gave me another bloody couple of stories.
we're gonna have to knock it on the head because
We-
I got hundreds now. So yeah. But that's all right, mate. We're going to keep talking about things like this and
exactly.
operational response and whatnot. So
Yeah.
all's well, but we can wrap it up, mate.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
so to sort of wrap it up a bit, like the goal, like I mentioned at the beginning, the legislative. What's the purpose of a police force? That people immediately think investigating crime, apprehending offenders. Yeah, of course. But the number one is protect life and property.
Yep.
And it just happens to be in one sentence, but protect life is a way higher than protect property.
Yep.
You never risk a life at the expense of property, sort of thing. So never try and protect property at the risk of life. It just doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
that's why we're always involved. When there's a person's collapsed is a multi-service response. So ambulance and police will be called, and a lot of the time it's because the police will provide extra bodies to assist the ambos in just the menial tasks of lifting, moving, holding things, all that sort of stuff, and crowd control, and making sure that the ambos are safe to because they must be focused. They need someone else to maintain their situational awareness. So the police role in that situation is to maintain the safe situational awareness around the incident. It's the paramedics' job to focus on the casualty and actually provide immediate the treatment that's needed. So that's why we work so complementarily together. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty good little setup.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And look, just before we finish off, I'd like to actually give a shout out, look, not only to the remote nurses because they are actually brilliant in what they do, but all nurses around the world because yeah, they do a fantastic job. Some of the shit that they have to deal with, and some of the thing that I think that pisses, especially police. I don't know, I don't know whether you feel the same, but what really pisses me off, and when people actually hurt ambos, it really,
Oh yeah,
if I get punched in the head, yeah, that's I suppose that's part of the operation that, well, part of the job that I do, and yes, it's unacceptable. However, I don't know, ambos are there to help, so just leave them alone. And I
yeah.
think what used to piss police off the most is if we saw somebody going after the ambos, it just really, really,
Oh, you won't walk away. You'll be hunted.
yeah,
They'll hunt you down.
exactly,
You'll end up if you touch a paramedic and police are nearby, you will go face first into the ground. Your arms are behind your back, and you're going to the clink.
that's right.
Simple as that. There's
Yep,
absolutely no tolerance whatsoever.
yep,
I mean that goes with everyone, but I mean if police are in a situation like that, and it's you might accept a few things and you'll tolerate a bit more. But if someone's hitting an ambo or
yep.
in just even impeding an ambo doing their job, they're gone. So get
Yeah,
rid of him, bang, click, see you bye in the cage. You can say what you want in the cage, but you're going to jail.
and you throw the book
Um,
at them. You give them every charge under the sun.
absolutely.
Yep,
Yep, you load the hamburger.
yep, exactly. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
mate, you want to finish it off?
Yeah, mate, that's it. We're wrapped up for another week, and we'll be back next week again as we always are. And yeah, keep the suggestions flowing. We do enjoy it, and we will talk to you next time.
All right, we'll see you later.